Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following are myself, Shawn Talley, and joining me for this, as he traditionally does, a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team. You can say he's the Joel to my Ethan, the Buscemi to my Stormari, the Francis McDormand to my John Carroll Lynch, although he might want to take that role. He is Mr. Cameron Burns. How goes it, Cam?
I mean, that might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. So I would love to be the Francis McDormand to your John Carroll Lynch.
Both of us at least have our hair, if nothing else. It may be graying. We're not as bald as John Carroll Lynch.
Weird. It's weird to see John Carroll Lynch when he's young. It's just weird to see he feels like someone who was born 52 years old. So even when you see him when he's young, he's still bald, and like he's one of those guys from the 70s who looked 50 when they were 20.
The math owl, as we call that. But yeah, it's also weird to see him in such a folksy kind of role because he's kind of become notable for, Zodiac and American Horror Story and things being just a creeper. But we're speaking, of course, about Fargo. As you know, you wouldn't have clicked this otherwise if you hadn't seen Fargo, probably, to listen to us all talk about it. So yes, Fargo, 1996. Cam, what are your thoughts on this movie?
My thoughts are, I love this movie. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I'm super excited to rewatch it and get into it because for a lot of different reasons, I think this is one of the great movies of our lifetime. You're about the same age as me, for reasons we'll get into on the other side of it. But yeah, I'm always excited to rewatch Fargo. It's a movie I try to get to every couple of years. And my favorite of the Coen movies, which is no small feat.
I've always ranked it among their best ones for sure. I don't know if I've always put it in my top few favorites, only because I think I owe this more revisits than I've given it. I realize it's been 10 plus years since I've seen this. I was thinking about where I lived when I last watched it. So yeah, it's definitely 10 to 12.
Was minimum. It Fargo, North Dakota? Was that where you lived?
No, sir.
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. It seemed like you'd never heard of the town Fargo.
What's this now? Oh, is that the same as the movie name?
Oh, geez.
No, I'm kidding. Oh, geez. We'll get into, well, that's the thing that sticks out and that has endured so much is that kind of Minnesota nice folksiness that everybody speaks in this movie. But yeah, I'm very happy to revisit it here. But before we do, can you give folks a quick explainer of what we do on this program?
Shawn, you bet your sweet ass I can. So what happens is we reach out to someone that, we want to talk to about movies, someone whose opinion we enjoy and we think can add something and be interesting to you listeners. And we say, hey, friend, colleague, what's a big blind spot movie for you? What's that giant movie in the zeitgeist that you haven't seen before? And inevitably they say, well, Lawrence of Arabia. And I say, yeah, I know, but that's 4 hours. So what else? And then, we come up with a movie and everyone has them. And usually they've got pretty big ones, just because there's a lot of movies and not a lot of time in the day. And so we bring that person on. We chat with them a little bit about why they haven't heard or why they haven't seen the movie and what they've heard of it and what they know of it. Then we send them on their merry way to watch the movie. And then we come back and we talk about it a little longer and in more detail. That's kind of the way it works.
The gentleman we have this week, I will say when we do ask these folks, they always give us more than one. It's true. Many have Lawrence of Arabia as a blind spot.
Everyone except Mike Flanagan has Lawrence of Arabia.
So the gentleman in question, Steve Hugh Nelson, he's a pal of ours. He's worked on many of films with us. We've had great conversations about movies with him, just sitting around,
Very sharp film mind. Very sharp film mind, Steve Nelson.
He's giving great notes.
He has a podcast.
Scripts, too.
Sorry. He has given us some great notes. And he has a podcast as well called The Horror Hippies that he does with his wife. And I love to listen to that as well, just because he's a very, I love to see what he thinks of movies after he's seen them, because I enjoy his perspective. I think he's a super sharp guy.
Absolutely. And again, if Steve came to us and was like, I haven't seen Steel Magnolias, we're like, oh, we get that. You're not like a older lady who might have been the target audience for that. But he gave us Fargo as one of his top few. And we said, that's it. Because one, it's in your wheelhouse. He looks like Big Lebowski for one. But no, he's kind of he's in the vibe of a Coen Brothers movie. And this kind of seemed like a perfect one.
He's kind of the age. He's of the age and of the film pedigree that it's pretty shocking that he hasn't seen Fargo.
Yeah, so it was kind of an easy go-to. Plus, Cam wants to rewatch it because he loves it so, and I'm definitely due for a rewatch because I remember it fondly. But yeah, that's where we're at. And we're going to go and introduce this guy, Steve Nelson, and ask him why exactly he never saw this film.
Let's do it.
Joining us on this installment, a real renaissance man of the film industry, a writer, producer, director, and actor. He'll even be the best crafty you've ever had if he's forced to do such a thing. He's worked on films such as The Stylist, Scare Package 2, Old Man, Clock, and the upcoming Shelby Oaks. There's a few Paper Street ones in there if you haven't noticed. His feature directorial debut, Old Wounds, is tearing up the festival circuit as we speak, including getting a submission into this year's Panic Fest, one of our favorite genre festivals held annually in Kansas City. He is Mr. Stephen Hugh Nelson, better known to his friends as Steve. So with that,
hey,
Stefan, thank you for joining us on the program here.
that was the nicest intro I've ever received, and I'm
excited.
You to be one of my parents now.
Well, Steve, cat's out of the bag. This is the first time, because Shawn was running late, you're going to get a view behind the curtain. This is the first time I've ever written the intro. So,
wow.
You're welcome.
But I gave it that panache or that panache, depending on if you remember the movie In the Line of Fire very well, and then pronouncing that word. But yes, I like the idea that me and you are his two dads. As long as I can be the Greg Evigan, that's a way, way old callback.
Oh, dude, on my two dads callback in the first 5 minutes of this episode, we're going to lose every listener.
I don't mind being the Paul Reiser either. Sorry, we're cutting Steve off.
I'm glad you highlighted my craft services work. I'm available for hire. I'm always interested in feeding people and making them happy. So I've got snacks here with me, but unfortunately you guys aren't here. So I'll eat them in your honor.
If you, dear listener, if you take anything away from this podcast, it should be that you need Steve to be your craft service person. It's just not the same without him. There's puns involved. It's a happier set for having Steve on it. So if you're looking for a craft service person, I cannot recommend Steve more highly. At a certain point, what are you even making the movie for if Steve's
No lies detected. He does feed you and make you happy. It's very true. And that's why we
guys always have the best sets. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad we can hang out outside of set.
All right, enough of this love fest. One more thing about this guest, Steve Hugh Nelson. He, a learned filmgoer as he has never seen the 1996 film Fargo.
I haven't.
Steve,
are you sure?
What's happening here? I mean, it's going to be a short podcast if you have.
I actually owned this DVD and never put it into the player.
I have owned Serpico on DVD for roughly 20 years, and I've never seen the movie. Fun fact. But I bought it for like $3 out of the Walmart bin. So, Steve, what happened here? How is it possible that one of the seminal movies of our lifetime has snuck by you?
Yeah, I think there was a point when I was in high school and college where collecting DVDs was my main hobby, what I spent all my money on, and I was just so obsessed with like amassing this perfect collection that would represent me as a person, and have thoughts of like, oh, when people come visit, they'll see my collection and ask questions, and it'll provoke conversations. And then I can hand this down to my children that I don't have. And I think this was just one of the many that I picked up knowing like, okay, this is supposed to be a great film, and just didn't get around to it for one reason or another. I think when you own something, it's almost like, oh, well, I own it, so I can watch it whenever. So I don't need to watch it today. I can watch it tomorrow. And then that tomorrow turns into, 20 years. But I'm really excited about this. And fortunately, I've only picked up on a few things over the years, but this is mostly blind going into this. So
that's insane. I love it. So that phenomenon you talk about of like, I own it, so there's no hurry is kind of what happens to me with TV shows on Netflix. So I do understand that conceptually, where it's just like, well, there's all these shows, but this one's not going anywhere, so we can get it later.
I need that added pressure. Like when Netflix tells you like, oh, we're deleting this forever in a week, then you have that pressure. Like maybe if my mom would have come in with like a sledgehammer and been like, you need to watch this by next month or else I'm destroying it.
She's like, I'm destroying one DVD an hour until you watch Fargo. So I guess the first question on everyone's mind, including mine, because I'm speaking for everyone today on the podcast, is are the Coen brothers kind of a blind spot for you in general, or is this kind of an outlier? Have you seen, for example, No Country for Old Men, Raising Arizona, Big Lebowski, Blood Simple? Like, where are you at with the Coen brothers?
Yeah, you listed about most of them that I've seen. So I've seen Raising Arizona, which I really love. And I know they had like a relationship with Sam Raimi, and like you could see kind of the influence on each other or how they had similar styles back then, which is really fascinating. And then Big Lebowski, which I would hear that a lot as I was growing out my hair. People were constantly calling me the dude. So I kind of have like a personal, stake in that one. And then, No Country for Old Men. I mean, that's just a classic of tension building, one of the greatest villains of the past 20 years. and True Grit, which was also solid. So a lot of their filmography is still a mystery to me, but their track record is pretty great. So
you seem to have hit the most of the other like big seminal ones, but it sounds like there's a few that
we'll go down their filmography on the post watch, afterbirth of all of it, just to see if there's a few missed, because there's a few where like the Raimi influence, like they helped out on a Raimi script, and then Raimi helped out with like Hudsucker Proxy. I will say, Cameron, this movie, strangely, so like they have a lot of like the kind of screwball comedies, and then they have a lot of like the very dark, meditative, violent movies like No Country, and I feel like Fargo might be the one weird like sweet spot in the middle of the two, sort of in the way Lebowski kind of falls in between them too.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best example of like the two wolves of the Coen brothers kind of coalescing into one single movie. They are very much usually, Raising Arizona or Miller's Crossing. Rarely are they Raising Arizona meets Miller's Crossing. And so this one, more than any, and it's my, before we get too far down the rabbit hole, it's my favorite Coen Brothers movie.
Interesting.
It is kind of what you said, where it is kind of the best of both worlds. You get the screwball nature, and you also get the dark, brooding stuff, like kind of mixed together in like this perfect, I guess we'll see if Steve agrees, but in this perfect kind of concoction that just works.
Yeah, this one, I don't know how much he said he's got a little cultural osmosis about the movie over the years, from like the Minnesota accents, the William H. Macy, and some of the other cast. But like,
I think there's not many wood chipper scenes in cinema. Maybe Tucker and Dale versus Evil, I think, has one. Yeah. But
I was going to ask, when you said you knew some stuff about it, I'm like, are you familiar with that? There's a wood chipper scene that's been talked about for years. Okay, so you know a little bit. So what do you expect kind of going to this movie? Yeah,
I mean, I feel like it'll be a fun watch with quirky characters and kind of offbeat, and maybe not paced like a thriller, maybe a little more laid back comedy that has like kind of some crime elements throughout. So I just want a little weirdness in my life, and snow, lots of snow.
Well, you've come to the right place, because this movie has both of those in spades. It has weirdness and it has snow.
In the Cameron Book of World Records, this is second only to Dr. Zhivago in whiteness.
I don't mean honkies. I
don't mean those Minnesota honkies.
Yeah, cast and snow. That's yes, there's an awful lot of whiteness in this one. One of the snowier movies. That's an interesting. I had to what are the snowiest movies? Sorry, not to go down a weird tangent, but I had never thought about what movies I've seen as the most snow.
Tarantino's True Romance, or his script, I should say, is Tony Scott's movie. But at one point they said they were talking about a copious amount of cocaine, and he was like, "It's Dr. Zhivago," and you knew exactly what he meant when he said that, just because it's so snowy, Snow White.
I mean, I think of The Thing, The Shining, 30 Days of Night, which I think are all three classic horror movies. So
I think 30 Days a Night is a perfect. The movie works and doesn't work kind of an equal measure for me, but the concept behind 30 Days a Night is kind of perfect.
Yeah, I love it.
Someone needs, at some point, the comics were great, and someone's going to come back and make kind of the seminal movie of that, I think, and lean into it a little harder, because the one that kind of came out was a little studio-y. But the concept is to me, the two best horror concepts I've ever heard are Nightmare on Elm Street and 30 Days a Night, because they're kind of perfectly encapsulated situation you can't get out of.
Yeah.
You can't not sleep, and you can't, if you live in a world where the sun doesn't come up for 30 days and vampires show up, that's just genius. So love that conceptually. The movie hit or miss, but I also a lot of snow. You are right. So yeah, horror.
Yeah, Steve rattled off a few right away. He knew them. He's like, yeah, I know the great snow movies.
He prepped for this. He's ready to go.
He is, and we'll actually send him off in a moment just to do it. I do want to say this show's coming up on a couple of years old now, and I remember Steve just being somebody we've been on set with here and there over the years. I remember pitching this show to him, and he was one of the first people that's like, "Oh, I've never seen Shawshank Redemption." We're like, "Great, that's a perfect movie for the show." And then we lost track of him for 9 months, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I watched Shawshank." I was like, "Dude, you had one job. That's supposed to be the movie we covered here."
We shot at the prison during Shelby Oaks, and everyone was having all these revelatory moments of oh, this is where that scene was, and oh my gosh, this is a classic location. And I was just like, oh, it's a rundown prison. I have no context for this. So I went and watched it and loved it. It's a classic. It deserves its status. But I did ruin our plan of
No, that
teaching it on
does
the
make
ship.
sense. The shooting at the Mansfield Reformatory in the middle of Ohio, where Shawshank was filmed, is a good enough reason for you to run watch that movie. Because yes, we were all marking out in different ways about the movie, and you're just like, "Who's this Stephen King you speak of?" Like,
You're like, I've heard the name once or twice.
but we were glad you had another very good one. Like Fargo is a movie. Again, there's no guarantee you'll take to it. There are times where we've hyped movies too much, or people hype them in their heads over the years, and this one certainly gained esteem. It was a favorite for a little bit during that Oscar season because '96 was kind of a funky year, and a lot of people thought Fargo was going to be the one that took the big prize. It ended up winning a couple awards, but we'll get into that on the other side. But yeah, I feel like you have the right vibe, and you kind of know the Coen's sweet spot here, and you kind of explained it in a great way. So I actually think you're going to come away definitely not disliking this movie.
Yeah, I'm stoked. And, I love genre blending. I just love when you can mix so many different elements and have it be a cohesive whole. So yeah, I'm ready to see all those different flavors that they add.
Nice. And we're ready to send you on your way.
Let's do it. Let's go watch a movie.
Indeed. We will return in just a moment here to get Steve's fresh thoughts on the film and much more. So stay tuned, don't you know?
Oh, geez. Oh, geez.
Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a good deal more for us. And you betcha, when we last left off, our guest, Steve Nelson, had not seen Fargo. He was late to the party, but at least he made it. We welcome him back now, a more cultured individual, a more learned film viewer, someone who has now seen the Coen brothers' 1996 film, Fargo. Mr. Nelson, are you feeling any or all of the aforementioned?
I'm feeling that you should keep doing the accent the entire
you darn tootin' he should.
Podcast. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Oh, geez.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I feel like my life has been changed now. Good or bad, I don't know yet. I got to keep you in suspense.
Oh man, don't Graham Skipper us. Don't tell us you hated it.
Don't put that on Graham. Again, time.
I'm putting it on Graham.
Expectations can definitely alter something that is going on 30 years old now. The weight of this movie might have been too much for Steve. But no, your overall initial reactions, what did you think about this movie as someone who's seen many of Coen Brothers movies and kind of knew what he was getting into?
I love this. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank God.
Yeah. And it's one of those movies where I'm like, probably should have watched it when I owned it 20 years ago, but I'm just glad that I made it to the party. It's that's what's cool about movies though, in general, is like, if there's something that you've missed out on, or you feel like left out on a conversation or inside jokes or whatever, you just got to go watch like one movie, 90 minutes, 2 hours, and then you're caught up and you're good to go. So I'm ready to, is there like a Fargo fan base? Can I be part of that now?
There is. You're a Fargonite.
Oh, good.
You're in now. Yeah, you're in now. I don't mess with Reddit ever since, never mind. We won't get into that. Ever since the world. Yeah. So I was watching this last night and I texted Shawn about halfway through and I was just like, is this the best movie of our lifetime? ? Because I just keep, every scene comes up and I'm like, oh, fucking love this scene. Fucking love this scene. Every single scene comes up. I'm like, I forgot about this scene. I love this scene. This might be my favorite movie, full stop.
Wow.
That is high praise.
Yeah, it's perfect. But was it kind of what you expected it to be? I would imagine so, given that you've seen so many Coen Brothers movies.
Yeah, I feel like overall it was what I expected, but just the balance of tone that they mastered here, which is so difficult to do when you're trying to make something a little goofy and a little funny, but you're also wanting to take those serious moments seriously, so they hit you. And I just felt like they balanced that, they nailed that here. I mean, just from the beginning with the whole based on a true story, where they're just having fun, whether or not that's true doesn't even matter. The way they pull you into this world just from the beginning. And this was an era, where like, I feel like true crime was really starting to become this huge subgenre. I mean, it's always been around, but when you get things like Unsolved Mysteries and Paradise Lost and, and then you had like Quentin Tarantino and Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And then you get to this and it's got a similar vibe to that, where you're hanging out with these criminals and they're talking about pancakes, and there's so many scenes of characters eating, and just really that's I think what surprised me the most is I felt like they really were able to like humanize and flesh out some of these characters and kind of show you these relationships in a simple easy way. And yeah, it's just like this movie just doesn't really have any fat on it. It doesn't waste your time. It just kind of
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because of what you said, like it never feels like it's in a rush. It never feels like it's trying to dole you out information. You're always feeling like you're just kind of catching people in like a slice of their life, but also it has no fat on it. And like, that's a really hard dance. I mean, there's in a couple ways, this movie really kind of sits on the razor's edge of both that, but also, like you said, like tonally, where you've got a bunch of people doing dumb things without ever falling into like, and William H. Macy's Jerry Lundegaard is the perfect example of this. And like the movie kind of hinges on him because he's constantly over his head and overwhelmed and constantly doing dumb stuff, but never does he feel like a dumb guy. And that's really hard to accomplish.
And my wife and I, we watch a lot of true crime, and constantly we're seeing like small town, kidnapping plots gone wrong and murders that, go the wrong way. And I don't know, can a murder go the right way? I don't know. But we're always wondering.
You get away with it.
Yeah.
Not for the dead guy.
But like, we're always wondering, like, who are these people? Like, who are these small town people who think they're so brilliant that they're going to get away with this master plan and no one will ever figure it out? And I love that we watched this and it was like, oh, that's the guy who thinks that he's going to get away with it. So yeah, I don't know. It's I really love the sense of place as well. Like I find a lot of times in movies they go with a generic location or time of year. Oh, it doesn't really matter. It's just summer. It's nice out. Who cares? And I love when something can be so hyper specific, like the locations that they name and the name of the sports team being Gophers and specific character names. And they make it so specific to that region. You really feel like you're there, and the way it's shot. And, Deakins is great at this. Like Blade Runner 2049 might be my favorite movie ever in terms of putting you in another place. And I really felt that here. And it was just so cold and isolated, and you could feel the cold. And I love, like, this is the 90s. So that steam, the breath you're seeing on the characters, that's real and you feel it. And I hate nowadays when you get the CG breath that's so obviously fake.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like this movie, Shawn and I were talking a little bit before we recorded, but like you have these fun little asides with these characters that you're like, are these actors? Or did they just find a guy? Like the scene where towards the end where the guy is cleaning the snow off his driveway or whatever, and he's talking to the police about the things that Buscemi's character said in the bar. And that's how they find him. It's like that guy felt like they just found him at a bar and was like, you'll do. His story is meandering. Like he feels so perfectly of that place.
Yeah.
Like it's just a casting masterclass that all of these characters just feel so like all the small characters, like the two prostitutes at the bar and like they just feel so perfectly of this world.
Yeah. You also named a few people that mentioned the running gag of, well, he's kind of funny looking, but they can't elaborate why.
In a general sense.
Both of them refer to him as, he's funny looking, kind of small, kind of funny looking. Well, what about him? Well, he's funny looking.
I don't know if this was the intent, but I love how, like, maybe initially with the accents and the small town vibe, maybe you could look down on these people or expect them to be kind of like yokels and like, but every step of the way, these characters you're mentioning, their stories are meandering and they feel like real people, but they're actually giving her good information. They're giving them good information to track down these criminals. And that's what I loved about Marge, from the beginning. I think it would be easy to kind of dismiss her. And then immediately she comes out and is just solving the crime and looking at the clues and figuring things out. And you're like, oh, wow, I kind of underestimated her at first, but she's kicking ass.
Well, she's great because she does good police work all the way through, and no one could deal with Peter Stormare's character, and she just totally shows up and subdues him. And as a pregnant woman, as someone who's pregnant, as a woman, as someone who's like small, as someone who's a townie, like all these things that, like you say, make them, you think that they're not going to be able to do the thing. And she's just constantly competent. But what I love about Marge is at the same time, she sees the best in everyone. And so there were multiple times where Steve Buscemi or sorry, not Steve Buscemi, William H. Macy, is where she has the two scenes with him at the car lot where he could not look more guilty.
Yeah.
And she is just giving him the benefit of the doubt at all angles until he literally
drives
gets in
away.
his car and runs. And then she's like, oh, geez, we got to run her. But like, she's this perfect combination of good cop and good person who just sees the light in everyone. And I think that's why that, the Mike scene, the Mike Yanagita stuff is in there, because it like really, it humanizes her away from the police stuff and makes her, she's just this perfect character to drop in the middle of all of these scuzzy people.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens is she literally gets dropped into this. We don't see her for a third of the movie, which, that reminded me a little bit of like Psycho or something. And especially with what happens with the money in the end, reminded me of Psycho. For her to command this movie, for her to make this movie hers, and we don't even see her for that first half hour.
Minute 33. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's this is the second movie in a row where that's happened. The good Captain Stephen Hiller from Independence Day, Will Smith, doesn't show up until about minute 23 in Independence Day. So it's the second movie in a row where the lead has showed up late to the party.
Second 1996 movie in a row.
1996. What a year.
That's right.
But also we do that in old wounds where you don't see Brian's character for half an hour.
Sick plug.
Yeah, sick plug.
No free rights.
You can delete that. But like I love when movies are allowed to let their characters breathe, and you give them these scenes that might only be tangentially related to the overall plot. I want more scenes in movies that are there just to flesh out the characters or the world a little bit. And like you were saying, when she meets with her old classmate, initially it kind of felt like a little pointless, or why was this in here? I appreciate that it's there for letting us spend more time with her, but also I think that's what makes her realize, oh wait, sometimes people do lie to your face, and kind of gets her back onto William H. Macy.
Yeah. 100%. Well, and I love that with a movie like this, because you're not dealing with master criminals, you don't need to spend, the police work doesn't need to be like insanely thorough and mind-blowing. And so it allows for more stuff like the Mike scene and for more character stuff, because this isn't True Detective where you need 8 episodes to be able to figure out this master class of criminals. It's like, no, it's just a dumbass who goes to a bar and talks about where he is and how he shot somebody. And it doesn't need to be any more than that. And so like the straightforward nature of it, I think it shines the light on the character work and allows that stuff to kind of be out in front, and you don't have to get bogged down in the actual police stuff. It's just there to get us from A to B to C to D, but without being so clever and tricky and thorough. And I love that.
It's funny you mentioned how straightforward this is, because we just finished season 1 of Twin Peaks, and there's a lot of similarities with the snowy small town close to Canada and the murder mystery and the detective trying to solve everything. So it's similar in a lot of ways, whereas Twin Peaks is very much not straightforward and is all over the place and twisty and turny. But man, I love more of that. Give me more of that aesthetic. Give me more sleepy small town with weird, quirky characters figuring out a murder mystery. I love that.
There's a bit of homogenization with America in general, where like every town's kind of samey in the same big box stores and the same strip plazas. And when you can set a thing in Hawaii or in Alaska or in somewhere like the cold Midwest, it does give it a little extra, like you said. We talked before, the straightforwardness. We don't ever even explicitly know why William H. Macy is in dire straits financially. It could be gambling, it could be something, but again, just in over his head. But they drop you right in. I mean, the opening scene is him going to those two guys, the henchmen, and saying like, here's what I need, here's this, here's the deal. They expect you to connect some dots in the movie. Even the great scene where he wants to tell his father-in-law that his wife is kidnapped. You just see him practicing it, and they don't ever actually show you the real phone call. We just jump ahead, and then they're meeting with him and Stan Grossman and talking about options because, again, no fat on this movie. Nowadays, that scene's like completely fleshed out. This movie's 2 hours and 25 minutes, and you don't even get, the studio would have axed Mike Yanagita from the movie.
And I think too, nowadays, modern movies kind of want to handhold you. And you hear things about Netflix wants screenwriters to state what the characters are doing. So when someone's doing laundry in the other room, they can still follow along or whatever. But I like how this movie respects the audience, and you have to piece things together. Because like with the money, early on, they're throwing around several different numbers. And her and I like paused the movie for a second and we're like, wait, it's like 80,000, but then they're going to get 40,000, but then he owes 300 something, but then there's 700 something thousand over here. And then it's 1 million. And then like right as we were getting confused, the movie clarified what was happening. And then it ended up being like a little bit of a character reveal and what's actually going on. And it's like, thank God, thank you for respecting us and doling out information in a way where you didn't just front load it with exposition and explain everything.
Well, I think that's part of why that Jerry Lundegaard character doesn't feel like a dumbass, because most of what he does is dumb, but most of his plan at least seems thought out. And because you're getting that doled out to you slowly and not all at once in the very beginning, I think it keeps him like, if in the beginning his plan seemed smart and then there was an hour and a half of just nothing but things going sideways, I think you would start to see him become more of like a comedic goof who's, not a real character. But because you're constantly being reminded that the plan was kind of smart, even though it's going tits up, it allows him to stay a relevant, interesting character. And it also makes it that much more fun when it just continues to go bad at every angle. And that's kind of what's great about this thing is like, it's a decent enough plan in the sense that like, he's thought it out enough. He came up with the plan that the guy at home watching the true crime show would come up with. And then real life kicks him in the dick and everything goes wrong, because of course it does, because nothing ever goes according to plan. And then watching him squirm under that is so good.
And they give that to you almost immediately, because real early on when the plan like immediately goes south, when he's trying to call it off right away. And it's like, nope, the train's already left the station, man. Fate is headed your way.
Well, I mean, you see it from the very jump, like the very moment that he meets Buscemi and Stormare, there's already been a miscommunication. He's already an hour late. Yeah. There's already cracks. Like, there's just no way it's going to end well from Jump Street. And yet we go all the way down that ride with them. And it ends exactly where you think it's going to end, or not how you think it's going to end. And like, from the very jump, there's a miscommunication. And so like little things like that, I think set up, like there's just so much smart setup in what the Coens are doing here. And that's a perfect example of like the minute these guys meet, they're already like, you're late. And he's just like, no, it was a miscommunication. It's just like, yeah, miscommunicate. Like then that's what kills the whole. Like everything happens because of miscommunications. There's just so much of that here with every character, but especially with kind of Jerry and with Buscemi's character, where they just can't get out of their own way.
Yeah. That's why I always insist to my wife that we be on time. I don't want it to lead to a domino effect that winds up in 6 or 7 people dead.
I appreciate that.
It can happen.
It can happen.
Peter Stormare, I think is how you say his last name. I feel like I've heard that in an interview or two. He's an underrated villain in general. He comes off with such menace from frame one he's in, and just proves he's a psychopath all throughout the movie, including when Steve Buscemi walks in late in the movie and the wife's finally on the floor and she wouldn't stop screeching. So you just know he killed her in some brutal way, probably. Yeah. But yeah, he's trouble. Like,
I mean, he is kind of the Anton Chigurh in training here.
A little bit, right?
Where like, he has no care for human life. Like it's just shooting someone is like taking out the trash. I mean, you see it when he's putting the Buscemi in the wood chipper at the end, where like none of it is affecting him. He just does not give a shit. He's just such a great psychopath.
Yeah, it's a great foil to Steve Buscemi. And like I thought of the phrase, the banality of evil, of how this dude is just like, oh, I'm just doing a job. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to, and just does not care, has no empathy for anyone around him.
Yeah, he's just, and you're right, he is the perfect foil for Buscemi's character. And like, again, just perfect screenwriting. And I will say that over and over again, like this movie is just perfectly written. Like,
yeah, I saw it like won screenwriting awards and is considered one of the best ever written.
I mean, just for the dialogue alone, but like even stuff like you get these two characters and what makes them different is what makes them fun. And like, you've got this one guy who is a complete blowhard and will not shut the fuck up. And is a complete phony, really. Like, he's not a killer. He's small time. And then you've got Peter Stormare, which I will continue to say Stormare. You can call him Stomari or whatever the hell you want, Shawn. I'm not changing midstream. But Peter Stormare, he doesn't talk. He doesn't emote. He kills people at the drop of a hat. He does, like, they are the exact opposites. They're like the other side of the coin from each other. And it makes for such interesting interactions where, like, you could tell Buscemi's afraid of him. And like, everything that he does is partially because of that. And what could have been just two generic throwaway characters have all this richness because of how they play off of each other, because how they're written against each other. Like, they didn't say like, oh, we have a cool idea for this guy, we have a cool idea for that guy, never the two shall meet. It's like, they're only as cool as the other side of their conversation. And like, that's where the Coens are great, is they're not only perfect characters and not only great characters, but they're great for each other. And they're great foils for each other. And that makes everything they do on screen more interesting.
And I think that really shows the collaboration of making a movie and how everyone can bring something to it. Because on paper, I think a lesser team could have made those characters a little more one note, almost like a sitcom. Because it's like,
I mean, every other movie since has.
Yeah. But from the writing to the performances and just the simple way it's shot, like the camera work is so simple throughout, but tells you so much, whether it's framing Jerry through the blinds so it looks like prison bars, or how, Marge and her husband are always shot together in the same shot. And so you feel that connection, you feel the closeness, whereas the other characters, when they're being divided literally by the frame, they're not, it's such simple techniques, but it works so well.
I love that. A perfect example of that is the shot where Marge keeps bending down and you're not sure, when she first gets to the crime scene, and you're not sure why, and you think she's found a clue or something, but it's because she's about to puke. Yeah. But like, every time she bends down, you see that second dead guy in the background. And like, it's framed so perfectly to where when she's standing, he's not there. But every time she bends down to puke, like, you see, there's a dead guy back.
Red Sweater Dead Guy has become like kind of the symbol, it's the poster art. It's on all the different kind of graphics over the years. Yeah. Red Sweater in the snow.
Surprised they didn't use her vomiting, as the main image, just bent over.
I mean, it should be just the 3-cent stamp mallard artwork is what I think.
You're a true crime guy, Steve. Shout out to her husband, Joe Carroll Lynch, who, like, after this was on Drew Carey for a bit, but became a notable character actor. He has a very memorable turn in Zodiac as the guy who was allegedly the killer. I don't know if anybody remembers him in that movie, but yeah.
And American Horror Story. He had a big run in American Horror Story.
He's popped up in a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
He was in Channel Zero. Season 2 of Channel Zero. He was great in that.
Well, what's great too is like the idea that he would go on to play, like, spoiler warning, the Zodiac killer, or like this killer clown in American Horror Story, is so hilarious given his role in this movie.
Yeah.
And I love, like, again, we talk about how, like, these characters aren't written in a bubble, but like, I love, like, how he and Margie interact, and how Margie interacts with the world, and how you basically, like, he's just they're such sweet people that you're just like, what if we drop these super sweet people into a big pile of shitty people? And then let's just see what happens. Their characters are so regular and normal and kind, and like, they're so out of place in a movie like this.
Couple goals.
Yeah, exactly. I would love a movie where it's just the Gundersons in the modern day. It doesn't need to be action or thriller, or it could be a sitcom for all I give a shit. I want Norm painting mallards. I want kids and grandkids running around. Like, I could watch those two characters interact with each other forever about nothing with no consequences.
And I think, like, there's kind of a simple, clear morality throughout this, where for the most part, like, the good people have a good ending and the bad people have bad endings. And it's just really summed up in the end when she's just kind of like, all of this for a little bit of money. Like, what's the point of that? And it's because she can't even fathom that, because she's so happy. She has a nice, simple life. Yeah. She's got her loving husband. They've got a house. They've got jobs. They have a kid on the way. Like, she doesn't need anything else. Like,
yeah. And that's such a beautiful moment And also, like, you watch the movie and you're like, because I'm watching the movie and I'm just like, you couldn't pay, like, I lived in Illinois for 3 years. You couldn't pay me to move back there. And you're watching this and you're like, everything is hard, scraping your car, and she's pregnant and everything is hard. And then at the end, she's just like, she has this great moment where it's just like, you did all this for a shortcut and a little bit of money. And like, and I love, the line is so perfect where then she just says, and here you are, and it's a beautiful day. And I just like, there's something so perfect about that line.
Yeah, that
just completely encapsulates the entire movie.
This current climate, that line hit me like a ton of bricks too. There's more to life than a little money, as we're seeing everything going on right now in our current political landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect. Also, if there's a drinking game for this, you're going to want to drink every time I say perfect during this episode, because I think this movie is. But it just is the perfect final line that completely explains what this movie is about. And Steve hit the nail on the head. It's very simple. Like, the good people get a good ending and the bad people get a bad ending. And people who try to cut the line and cheat and rob and steal get fucked. It is kind of like what Shawn said, in the current climate of the world, it's kind of nice to see. It's kind of nice to see the good people get the good ending and the bad people get the bad ending. And like, it's such a weird thing to say because it's obvious, but
it's interesting because it's like, is this the Coens reflecting on the state of the world? Because they made this in the mid 90s when, you know, largely things I feel like were pretty good in America, but then they go and make a decade later, they make No Country for Old Men in a post 9/11 world. Mm-hmm. And that's like the complete opposite of this, where there is evil and bad things happen to good people and evil can win.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot can change in people's perspectives in, you know, a decade or 2 decades. And like, their worldview had probably changed some. I think everyone's worldview has changed. And yeah, it led to they're also older and, you know, they've been through some shit and they realize life isn't fair. And it's not outside their own possibility that they started making movies that kind of reflect that. And like, yeah, that is a perfect example of a movie that's not super dissimilar from this one, except it's very dissimilar in that way.
I've gone on tangents about this before about how 2007, I will argue till the day I die, that and 99 are the 2 best film years of our lifetime. And that 07 had these, I count them together, There Will Be Blood, Assassination of Jesse James, No Country, were all these very nihilistic meditations and very kind of meditation on loneliness and nihilism. And they all have they're like a spin on the classic Western. And I lump Zodiac in with that too, as those 4. They were like kind of 4 instant classics that all came out near each other. Yeah, No Country very much has that kind of exactly what you said. Evil is evil, and there is no karma. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. And again, we're seeing that in the modern world right now. If there was karma, somebody'd be paying for this shit right now.
Well, there's also something, too, about the simple premise of what happens when a character encounters a bunch of money. Because obviously, Fargo, No Country for Old Men, but it seemed like maybe inspired their friend, because Sam Raimi went and made a simple plan. And it's just that premise keeps coming up again and again. And I think it's just like, it's almost like in horror or supernatural or sci-fi, like sometimes it doesn't even matter what the device is. You know, it doesn't matter. It matters how the characters react to it. That's what's interesting, you know, the human condition. So that's just intriguing to me that keeps coming up.
Yeah, I think what would you do in a situation where you had a path to easy money is an evergreen movie, novel, TV show premise, where it's just because it's not about the money, it's about the person. It's the same reason zombie movies aren't about the zombie, right? They're about putting people in a situation that's a powder keg and watching them explode. And that's kind of the same thing here, where it's like, it's not even about the money, it's about what the money makes people do. And then how those people then bounce off of each other in mostly violent ways or occasionally violent ways. It's like, it is a setup that causes a powder keg and then people react to that in differing ways. And like, that's a kind of a tried and true format for making that happen. And anytime there's a device that makes people crazy or act outside of the way they would normally act, that's good for a movie, right? Like we want to put characters under pressure and see what happens. And I think this is, probably the the number one way that movies have been doing it since, the turn of the century or the turn of the last century, which is give them a bunch of money that they didn't earn and watch them try to hide it from people or try to take it from people or whatever. And it's creating a situation where a bunch of relatively normal people lose their fucking mind.
Yeah. Treasure on the Sierra Madre. There will be blood. Anytime people get money and or power, they usually don't do well with it.
They start selling Cybertrucks on the White House lawn.
Yeah. My wife's few notes during this movie were fucking men, 3 or 4 times, because this whole movie is about just men being horrible.
That checks out.
She also said halfway through this movie is very teethy. Lots of close-ups of people and their wild Midwestern teeth.
Yes, that there is a lot of that.
There's some close-ups there. I'm also from Illinois. I'm from the Chicago suburbs. So there definitely were times throughout where I got that kind of like little bit of nostalgia, but also mostly like, I'm so glad I'm not there anymore. When he goes outside, you get that wonderful shot from above of him walking in the parking lot, and then he's trying to scrape off his car of ice. That's what I told Erica. I'm like, you want to move to Denver? That's going to be half your year right there.
Sounds like hell.
Yeah, I hate it. It's what's funny about this movie too is it's called Fargo, but it wasn't shot in Fargo, and very little of the actual movie takes place in Fargo.
Yeah. Isn't that just the opening scene, like the bar?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, pretty much. It's where they meet up in the very beginning, and that's where but I think it's just something about that city just elicits like what they were going. It still feels like a great title for it. Like it just something about Fargo, you just immediately think cold. And like Midwest. And but it is funny that the vast majority of the movie takes place in small towns in and around.
And
then
half Brainerd, half Minneapolis. It's kind of strange. Yeah. Although the TV series, to my knowledge, does physically take place there each season. I've only watched the first season.
I think each season's different. I don't think they all take place in Fargo.
Oh, okay. Are they nearby? In a similar way?
I think it's the same as the movie. I think they dance around kind of the Minnesota, North Dakota triumvirate or whatever that's called. It tries 3. Minnesota, North Dakota, biumvirate. Yeah. Is that a word? Biumvirate?
Sure.
Man, why didn't we get a Big Lebowski TV show? What the heck?
Biumvirate.
I mean, give it time. Give it time.
Steve, I think you said you never watched the Fargo TV series, but if you did not know, it is anthology style where you can watch just a season and it kind of is its own little thing. But I know everyone had a pretty amazing top billed cast. Like season 1 was Billy Bob Thornton, Martin Freeman, Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons were in the follow up, Ewan McGregor in the third.
Yeah, I mean, I got into season 4 before I kind of waned off of it, but it's very good, especially the first couple seasons. So highly recommend. It's very much in keeping with the similar tone and kind of feel of this. Like I was telling Shawn, there's something really funny. There's like a really funny Coen-y gag in season 3 where Carrie Coon's character is like the small town cop, and every like electronic thing that like you trigger, washing your hands where like the water comes automatically, or the soap dispenser where the soap comes automatically, or like a sliding door where like just being there opens it up, she never triggers them throughout the whole show. It's like a running gag where like it's like the world doesn't think she exists. It's just such a fun Coen-y thing. But yeah, they do a great job with that TV show, even though I've kind of waned on it.
I feel like Steve would be a fan of this. Are you a fan of the movie Tremors?
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I literally think
you're a cool
it's
guy.
one of the best screenplays ever written.
I love it too, but I'm only segueing and going around the big long circle to say this. There was famously a pilot they shot with Kevin Bacon to make a series and never got picked up. Similarly, 1 full year later after this movie was a big hit and a big festival hit and a big Oscar hit and all that, they did do a straight up continuation style pilot where Kathy Bates directed it. It was Edie Falco starring as Marge, and then Bruce Bowen was going to reprise his role as Officer Lou. And for whatever reason, the Coen brothers were not involved and it just didn't get picked up. So many years later, now the Fargo TV series is executive produced by the guys and all that. But yeah, it just was one of those things that just didn't work in the moment for whatever reason.
I'm not sure I agree with you 100% on your police work, Lou. Just wanted to get that in there. Possibly my favorite quote from the movie.
DLR. They didn't finish the license.
Oh, Margie. That's another perfect example of like Marge being very sharp. Immediately getting
Now, I'm just saying, if graboids did make their way up to Fargo, that is something I would watch.
Just because they're sandworms doesn't mean they can't be in a snowy place. They're stand underneath the snow.
One of the movies, they were in the snow. It's fine.
Oh, see, I didn't get that far. I got to like number 3.
Yeah.
I bought the box collection of them, but I've never watched the later sequels. I probably should remedy that.
Margie Gunderson leading the charge in a Tremors sequel.
Her and Burt Gummer teaming up.
Oh, it'd be so good.
All right, I got Steve way off track.
We did.
We'll go through a few more.
You can't bring up Tremors around me, dude.
I know. Sorry, I knew you'd love that movie because you're Steve Nelson. But yeah, Joel Ethan Coen. They wrote, directed, they produced, they edited this movie. They've
under the pseudonym.
Yes, as
under
editors.
the pseudonym Roderick Janes.
Yes,
which is not a real person, despite having been nominated for an Oscar. In fact, they concocted an insane plan whereby if they won that Oscar as Roderick Janes, Albert Finney in a disguise would show up and accept the award as like a grizzled British editor from like the 30s. So the Academy Award.
So I didn't read that for this movie in research, but I have heard that before about their
Academy
plan to do that.
Did not take too kindly to the plan. Luckily, they didn't win, and it became a non-factor. But yeah, it was a thing. But yes, Roderick Janes is not a real editor. That is the brothers.
But did you see another wacky credit is the artist formerly known as Prince?
Well, it's turned sideways and has a smiley face in it. But yes, and that's actually the storyboard artist played that character in the movie and didn't want to be credited with his name. Instead, he turned the artist formerly known as Prince logo sideways.
Which sticks out.
It certainly does. And put a smiley face in it. But yes, hey, that also started a bunch of rumors that Prince was that character, which is not true.
Minneapolis Mount Rushmore, the artist,
right area,
formerly and currently is Prince. My one disappointment was they to learn that they built the Paul Bunyan statue and retrofitted a truck stop as a Babe the Blue Ox. I just very much assumed that was a real thing in the middle of nowhere up there because Paul Bunyan country.
Man, what even happens to that after the movie? Does that just get set on fire, you know?
I imagine it dilapidated pretty quickly if they just kind of made it out of,
I like to think Guillermo del Toro has it in his house.
Yeah.
That's what I like to think. Yes, he's got all those props. Or Mike Flanagan has a bunch of props too. Yeah. Maybe Mike Flanagan has the Paul Bunyan statue.
I loved when we were working at Troublemaker Studios and Robert Rodriguez has like a statue of Danny Trejo and he's got all these props from Dusk Till Dawn and like keeping that alive. He has almost like a museum of his movies and that's
the cool thing about the fact that he shoots everything there at Troublemaker is like it doesn't go missing. It's always there. So like they've been shooting everything there since I can't even remember the first thing they shot there, but it was early. And so they've got so much cool shit just sitting around. You like turn a corner and like you said, there's the Danny Trejo life-sized statue. You're just like, what the fuck?
It literally is life-size. That is a very small man. I don't know if you ever seen him in person.
Man.
So I'm at a horror con. I'm like, you're like 5'5".
Fun story about Danny Trejo. I actually just learned from another podcast. So this is real good podcast humor here. He was when asked who the craziest person on the set of Con Air was, because as you remember, there's a bunch of criminals and bad guys or whatever. He said, without blinking, John Cusack. So nice. He said that was the only guy on the set that scared him. So take that for what you like. Right. It's so also, now that we're getting into some of the housekeeping, the movie says that it is based on a true story. It is not really anyways. It's very, very loosely based on a couple of things that may or may not have happened. Mainly it's just there to build intrigue and to get the Steve Nelsons, the true crime people, excited enough to watch. It didn't work on Steve, obviously, because it took him 30 years
also,
to watch.
I work primarily in found footage. And so that's part of the fun is like, yes, we know this isn't real, but we're going to pretend. Let's all play and pretend.
Yeah, it definitely worked for the movie. I mean, it got people talking and it took on kind of a life of its own. And which even led to, there was another rumor, which became a movie about, there was an Asian woman who came to Minnesota and ended up dying, and people thought she was there to find the money from Fargo. And it's been debunked, but that was the rumor for a long time. And that actually, they made a movie about that rumor. So it's like it's a never-ending meta spiral of creativity there. But yeah, it feels right for the movie. Yeah. Even if it's not true.
They spun off a real crime story they read about, but saying based on, you have leeway to do whatever you want. And also it kind of gives you a little bit of people go along with a little more if something outlandish happens in a movie they hear is based on true story, because they don't know which bits are and aren't. But yeah, there was a real wood chipper death that they kind of took, and then there was a real
I think it does buy you some goodwill from people being like, that would never happen, or like, that's too far-fetched.
Yeah. And I think as a creator, screenwriter, like you could take inspiration from anything and any little nugget or any little spark of inspiration. And like Wes Craven with Nightmare on Elm Street, like just seeing a news article about, oh, some people have been dying in their sleep. That's like enough to be like, oh, hey, that's a great idea.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, sure. It works for this specific movie. And like, I mean, it was loosely based, so they're not lying necessarily, but it definitely just feels right for the movie. So I do have one critique. I keep saying perfect. I don't know if it's a critique of the movie or if it's just a thing that I always think about. And I get, why it seems like the plan to bury that money in the snow is possibly the dumbest plan ever. Like, no, I get that the Buscemi character is not a smart guy and he's been shot in the face. So there's that. But like, you're never finding that money again.
Well, they kind of lampshade that, though, by he looks both ways and there's not a single landmark in sight. And he goes, damn it, there's not like a tree or anything he'll remember.
There's just so many better places to put that money.
Well, he was in a rush to give back to tell him, here's your 40 grand.
And he had been shot in the face. Can't stress that enough.
Yeah. I will say I Mandela affected something real bad in this movie. It's been many years as I talked about. I have not seen it or rewatched it as many times as I have other Coen movies, but I for sure thought there was a scene where a car drives by and we pan over and you see like the new snow mounded over it or something. And I thought there was some kind of callback shot to seeing that now buried. And that did not happen. So I completely
it's just foreshadowed
in my head.
It's foreshadowed by the guy in the yard talking about the bar he bartends at, where he's saying more snow coming in.
I know there's a great button on that to like somebody who's lived in the bottom half of the United States most of his life and can't imagine being in that kind of cold and looking around and going, oh, there's this storm coming. It's going to get colder. I'm like, oh, Jesus.
Colder. Yeah. I had a Mandela effect on this movie as well, which often one of the funny things about this podcast that we do, Shawn, is that you get to rewatch stuff that you haven't seen in a while, but stuff that was like a pretty seminal thing for you. And I do think a lot of times your brain creates and remembers things that weren't there. Because this is not the first time this has happened to me, but like I had a Mandela effect on this one too, where I thought, and I've seen this movie quite a bit, but I thought for sure William H. Macy, the second scene with Marge Gunderson where he basically flees, I so vividly remember a scene of him running between cars. Like, not just like there goes him in his car driving away. I pictured him like running through the lot in like a wide shot. Like I see it in my mind, but that shot does not exist.
No, we can connect dots like that. And then as soon as our memory gets that in their brain, it's like part of it. So it's hard to.
But I see it. I see the framing of it. I see everything. Like, very weird.
Speaking of Macy, before we talk about the Coen's frequent collaborators, but he came in considered for a smaller role, but he like absolutely slayed the audition, and they made him the lead character. I would say 96. In 96, he was on the rise because the following 2 years alone, he pops up in Air Force One, Boogie Nights, Wag the Dog, Pleasantville. Speaking of Psycho, the Psycho remake, he was definitely poised to break, and this movie really did it. Like, it was the first one that kind of raised his profile that highly. But and then he's gone on to work with P.T. Anderson a handful of times.
Yeah, that's such a perfect casting for his character here, because he's so pathetic and such a loser that like it would be very unpleasant to spend time with this guy with the wrong casting, but you almost feel bad for him. He's just so, I don't know.
He's just trying to do his best. His best just isn't good enough.
His best is not good enough.
And he's got this shithead father-in-law. Another one of my favorite lines is, Gene and Scotty never have to worry.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like, the father-in-law gives him shit all the time. And like, he's just such a sad sack. It's like that tried and true character of like that sad sack who just yearns for more. But the minute he tries to do anything about it, he gets slapped back down.
Meanwhile, the end of the movie, that's the other note my wife has, like, he just ruined his son's life. He killed his mom. He's going to jail. His grandfather's dead. The 4 kids.
He also disappears without the kid is like the cops in horror movies. Like, we're just pretending they're not there. Like, he just disappears and goes on the run without any thought for what he should do with his kid. Like, I love that the son is like just an inconvenience throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
He's just constantly in the way. William H. Macy multiple times forgets of his existence. Where he's like, what did you tell Scotty? He's like, oh, geez, I got to tell Scotty.
Yeah.
Like, he completely forgets he has a son like twice in the movie. And it's like, yeah, it's just so funny how they handle Scotty, who Like, I feel like probably some of his role got cut out because there's enough of him, and like there's a scene where he's sad, and like there's enough of him to think that there was like some sort of arc that got cut back. But yeah, he feels very kind of in the way to the rest of the story.
I'm looking forward to like when I watch this again in 5 years and I get Mandela affected and I just forget that kid's in the movie.
Was that Charlie Korsmo, by the way?
No, that was not.
Was it not? It looks like Charlie.
No, he's been in a few things, but nothing too major. He was in like Little Big League and some other kid movies. But Frances McDormand, we've talked about it a bit. She's been married to Joel Coen since 1984, has been in a number of their films, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Man Who Wasn't There, and so on. But she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for this role, and I feel it was pretty deserving. I think she was a heavy favorite all through that award season. First of her 3 and counting, because she also won for 3 Billboards and Nomadland in the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, she is one of our great actors of our generation. I mean, she's one of the greats. She's up there with Meryl Streep, and you can count on one hand the amount of actors with her catalog. You can count on one hand
actors with 3 awards for acting.
Yeah, I mean,
Nicholson, Daniel Day-Lewis, Katharine Hepburn, maybe.
And some of her best performances didn't win. So she
only gets lead. She's been nominated for supporting 3 times and not one for Mississippi Burning, Almost Famous, and North Country. But if she's in the lead role, she's almost a shoe.
It's another example of that balancing of the tone, because this is a tightrope walk, and one slight misstep ruins this. You could be way too over the top or too goofy or just not find the heart of the character. And I mean, she nails it.
Well, she's the heart of this movie, and she deserves every award that she won. This movie, like we talked about it, like at the 33-minute mark, you're like, this is a really good movie. And then she shows up and you're just like, never mind. This is an absolute fucking masterpiece. Like, she is the heart of the movie. She is the glue of the movie. She does all the heavy lifting, and like, not all, plenty of people doing heavy lifting, but she does a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, her performance and the quality of it is what holds this movie together. As just average performance from some other actor in that role, and you've got just an okay movie. Her performance and her playing Margie Gunderson is the difference between a pretty good movie and a great movie.
And it was so nice seeing Siskel and Ebert agreeing and calling this a masterpiece. And it's funny because even when they agree, they're arguing, but
yeah, they both had it as the best movie of 1996. So, yeah, it even got those guys on the same page.
Ebert ended up ranking it 4th on his list of movies of the 1990s even.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to go down as one of those movies where people look back in 50 years and go, wait, that didn't win Best Picture?
Can Steve name what won Best Picture in the March 1997 for the year 1996 Oscars?
Absolutely not. I'm just wondering where...
Cam, do you know without Googling? Do you know? Because it's a Seinfeld running gag.
Oh, God, I do. Hold on.
That'll give it away if you know Seinfeld at all.
I don't know Seinfeld, but I'm pretty sure it was The English Patient.
Yes, because I think Elaine fell asleep in it 3 times.
Which is a movie that I do not love.
Which, by the way, when's the last time anybody talked about either?
Well, that's the thing. Like, it already is the case that this is the movie that should have won that year. But like, wait for 40 years when no one's talked about The English Patient at all, and it's a completely forgotten movie, and people are still talking about Fargo like exactly what it is. One of the great American movies of its.
Yeah, I just wonder on Ebert's list of best 90s movies, where was Tremors? Was that 3rd?
It should be top 10. I think we're all in agreement here on this.
Was that right?
Tremor safe space.
Deep Rising.
So I'm not the biggest Tremor. I like Tremors. Don't jump down my throat.
Revisit.
I'm not the biggest Tremors historian once you get past the first one. Like, I've seen a few of them. There's some I haven't seen. Like, maybe we need to do a Tremors 2 through 20 or whatever it is deep dive here on this as a side pod. But yeah, I like Tremors, the first one. I think I've seen the second and third one, but after that, it gets real touch and go for me.
Dude, you could start your spin-off podcast. Your spin-off podcast, Lights, Camera, and Action. We can talk about Tremors.
I thought you were going to call it Late to the Tremors.
Late to the Tremors.
Feeling the burns.
Either way, one of those two will stick.
When y'all open in a Paper Street museum is what I'm wondering. Y'all have the props and costumes from everything?
It's called Alex Uding's Garage.
Yeah, they all exist.
And he'll charge you $5 to do a walkthrough.
I've been there already. Great.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you have.
Yeah, Aaron has a few, Alex has a few, very few are actually out and being
I have a few too. I have a giant Rad Chad's funeral photo in my garage. Anyway, speaking of some frequent collaborators with the Coens, Carter Burwell, who has worked on almost every single Coen project except Inside Llewyn Davis. It's funny, the score comes and goes in the movie, but it's very prominent in the beginning and the end. But he based that musical motif on a Norwegian folk song. It's kind of memorable, almost feels a little bit of a Western motif too.
I think it's a crime against humanity that this was not nominated for Best Score.
Oh, yeah. Oscars are so funky with that category in general. You could put like 30 seconds of a classical music number in your giant sprawling score and they'll be like, disqualified.
This should have been nominated for Best Score after the initial shot in the snow.
Yeah.
The long shot of the lead-in drive or whatever, like that was enough for the score to be nominated. And then the rest of the movie should have won. But the fact that when I looked it up after, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe the score wasn't at least nominated is insane because it is so good. You're right. It's kind of like a sad Western.
A lovely segue to the cinematography because he's already mentioned my name, Steve did. Demigod Roger Deakins, Shawshank Redemption, Skyfall, Assassination of Jesse James, one of Steve's favorite visual movies, Blade Runner 2049. He'd worked with them on Barton Fink, Hudsucker Proxy, and after Fargo did many, many more with him. Lebowski, Intolerable Cruelty, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which a lot of people recognize for cinematography, No Country for Old Men, True Grit, Hail Caesar. He's definitely peanut butter and jelly with these guys, and then their movies always look amazing.
Yeah, Deakins, there was a time where, like, with cinematographers, it was Deakins and Bob Richardson and everyone else. Like, those two guys were so far out ahead of everyone. And it's they've gotten older and pickier about what they do. And some of the new guys have kind of come up. But, like, yeah, Deakins and Richardson are just, when I think of that whole 80s, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, like, they're the two cinematographers that just immediately popped to mind for me.
Yeah. And I love being able to track an artist's career and see how they've grown and evolved. And when you go back to this, like, if Fargo is shot wonderfully, there's some fantastic shots, and it's pretty simple. But then to compare that to something like Blade Runner, and it's just like in that 20 years, like the leaps, the exponential growth of what he's capable of, to a point where, like, I don't even know how you make something like Blade Runner 2049. Like, I literally don't even know how humans created that.
Yeah, I mean, he did, like, there's nothing about the cinematography of this movie that makes you go like, oh yeah, this guy's eventually going to make Skyfall or Blade Runner 2049, or these like
movies amazing $150 million plus budget. So he was afforded the ability to make massive light grids and insane stuff. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shawn. Could you do this with $150 million on a light grid?
No, but he can.
Just checking. He
can.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly can.
I'm looking back. This only had $7 million at the time,
and it made 60, which is also an insanely low number. But it was a different time. I mean, it did well, but it still just feels like a number that isn't doing well. Like the theatrical thing has changed so much that it's hard. It's like apples and oranges. But, like, this is exactly the kind of movie that studios don't make anymore and should. This is a $20 million type movie now that very rarely gets made unless it's by the Coen brothers.
Like you said early on, one of you said it would be a 6-episode sprawling prestige TV show.
Well, it is.
But that's what they do now with anything.
It has become that.
Literally, but I'm saying this exact story would have been stretched into some kind of mini run Apple TV or Hulu or something.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like, it's, in general, it's just the film industry isn't making this stuff. Luckily, TV is, which is why we're getting some insanely good television right now.
But that's also why I think a lot of low budget and micro budget is thriving right now, because they're the ones taking the chances. And I always bring up the same examples, but I mean, like, Skinamarink, $15,000, something that's so not mainstream and so audience unfriendly. You're not going to see.
I love it. It's always the goal of any movie is to be aggressively audience unfriendly. I made a movie. It's audience unfriendly. Oh, so good. Yeah, indie stuff is, and this was an indie movie of its time, and 7 million then obviously was, or 6 million or whatever it was, is obviously would be quite a bit more now, but still, I mean, since the dawn of time, the more interesting, complex, thought-provoking stuff comes out of the indie world. I mean, we saw it this year, a couple of weeks ago with the Oscars, where a bunch of people got together in Hollywood to celebrate Anora and The Brutalist, 2 movies that they refused to make.
Yeah. And those directors are both broke.
Yeah. Join the club.
Yeah, well,
filmmaker.
Not for nothing, Steve, but Shawn and I have been doing the whole broke filmmaker thing since before it was cool.
Yeah.
Well, not to. I know we're like trying to wrap up here. I don't want to go on a.
No, we're not. How dare you?
Yeah, we are.
Huge tangent. But
let's go.
Do you guys see a change in the next couple of years? Like something like, I know we're like trying to wrap up here. I don't want to go on a.
No, we're not. How dare you?
Yeah, we are.
Huge tangent. But
let's go.
Do you guys see a change in the next couple of years, like something like the 70s or
in
something?
My career, yes.
Yeah. Shawn's going to become an accountant.
Should have done that from Jump Street. My parents were right.
It's interesting. Yes, I think in general the film industry has always been pretty malleable. And it ebbs and flows and things change. And wasn't so long ago the streaming stuff was great because everyone needed content and they were spending a bunch of money. And yes, now they've kind of driven that car off the cliff and everyone's kind of sitting around looking to figure out what's next. I don't know what that answer is. Historically, there's always been a next. It was, home video, it was television, it was, talking pictures, it was color. There's been a million things that have jump started the industry. Something else will, I think. I don't see movies going away, but I don't know what that is. And I don't know when that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, I do think ultimately one of the problems is that everything is being pushed to the polls. So studio movies are now $300 million and indies are getting pushed the other direction and they're all $300,000. And we've lost a lot of the in between. We don't make the $20 million studio comedy anymore. We don't make the $20 million, the $8 million spotlight type movie. We don't make the indie world by and large, outside of a few, Anora being one of them, and The Brutalist. But outside of those, there's a lot of the indie stuff is being pushed cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And that's why no one has any money. And that's why these guys don't have money. And so, yeah, I mean, something's got to change as it pertains to both independent film and theatrical, because it's just not good for anybody. It's not good that an Indiana Jones movie can make $400 million at the box office and be considered a failure.
Yeah.
And it's not good that you have to struggle to get $500,000 to make a movie on the other end. And so, I think something will happen. The question is when and what. And that's the thing I don't think anyone has an answer for.
There's a bit of a twofold problem with it. The streamers did break a lot of things, and they've conditioned people to not go see the $20 million movies. Everything's got to be a big event movie. So that's what they're putting all their eggs in, is the $100, $200, $300 million thing that they think is a guaranteed IP success. So yeah, that plus just the general risk averseness that they've hit. Everything's been Wall Streetified. Everything's about growth and growth and growth. And then they're being so risk averse because of it. Now they're like, hey, make your own stuff. And if we like it, we'll poach it, but we're not going to fund it. And that's the bigger problem, like Shawn Baker has pointed out. You used to fund these people and these artists in these smaller movies, and now they're like, no, if you break out, we'll come grab you, because we're not going to put any kind of development into you anymore. And that is also
yeah, I mean, it used to be that's what the studios did, right? They were willing to fund the $10 million Scorsese movie because at some point they're getting a relationship with Martin Scorsese, and that will lead to $50 million Scorsese movies. And it used to be you wanted to get in early on these guys and you'd spend a little bit of money and make these smaller movies to do it. And now they're just figure it out somewhere else and then we'll come a knocking. And that's troublesome, especially because the avenues for indie film have gone down. And so they're saying, go make an indie, and the indies are saying, how? There's a lot that has to get figured out. It's a weird spot right now, man. Streamers came in and they broke cable and they broke theatrical and they broke home video. And then they went, surprise, we're not making money. So we also broke streaming.
And they also broke people's brains and the way they consume stuff.
Well, they spent a good portion of time teaching you that the cost of an average movie is zero. Because I can turn on Netflix right now and watch The Electric State or Craven, 2 movies that came out today on Netflix because I happened to look. And those were big studio type movies. And so if you're led to believe that movies are free, then yeah, don't be surprised if no one's going to pay $15 to see it. Why would you? I love theatrical. I love movies in the theater, but even I struggle with that. It's just There's a pile of big ass movies that I haven't seen yet that are streaming right now. Why would I not watch those? And why would I go to the theater?
You're paying a movie pass equivalent for home theater movies. $15 a month for all the movies you can consume.
Yeah. So it's a weird spot, man. It really is. And like, someone smarter than me will figure it out. And obviously I have theories and ideas that no one cares about. But yeah, it is a rough spot right now. And I don't see it getting better in the very short future. But I do think film has been very malleable. And we've thought the film industry was dead 5 or 6 times. And it's never been the case. That's the collective we, not like the 3 of us. But the industry is in need of a makeover, and someone has to be the one to do it.
I think for smaller artists, controlling your distribution and not giving that away and getting money directly from your audience. But also, like we were talking about Hundreds of Beavers, like, look what happens when a movie is given time to find an audience, to build word of mouth. It's not because now we've been conditioned like, oh, that big movie that's in theaters, it'll be on streaming next week. So why would I go spend $50 or whatever? I want to see more films being allowed to spend, how it used to be. Where in the 70s or 80s, a movie could be in a theater for months or years. You could go see Star Wars for years.
E.T.
And it's like,
forever.
I would love to see Hundreds of Beavers. I would love that to just keep going. Just keep going as long as people are showing up. Because then also like when you're,
but they're only part. To be clear, though, sure. And I'm super excited about what's happened for Dinner in America. And I'm super excited for what's happened for Hundreds of Beavers. But like those people are showing up because they're anomalies. If that was a thing that happened all the time, people would stop showing up. Like if there was money in second run movies at the movie theater, they'd be taking advantage of it. Like the minute that becomes the norm, people will stop going because it stops being an event.
We're just going to chop up old wounds into 700 TikToks, and then we're just going to distribute it that way. So
let's do it. And then we'll sell them as NFTs. Is that still a thing? Does that work?
The movies. Old wounds. Look for it at a festival near you.
Yeah. I don't know when this is going to go live, but we're actually playing 2 festivals, 2 countries on the same night, April 2nd. We're doing Panic Fest virtually, and then we're at Toronto Indie Horror Fest in Canada. So really excited about that.
Love Panic Fest. Those guys are great.
Do we keep all that on the podcast, or are we still recording?
That's up to you guys.
I know we're all soapboxing. We're all very concerned about it for many.
I think we can. I don't see any reason.
No, I'm kidding. But just to bring us back around. Yes, I'll be an accountant in a couple of years. Cam will be a garbage man. Steve will be making more found footage movies because he's stuck through it.
That's right. His subscription model will change the industry.
Well, I told Erica, I said, we're going to make movies, and my one promise is that we'll never go into debt. So I know a lot of filmmakers, they take out their credit cards and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was like, nope, we're only going to spend what we have. So, and then I like a subscription model. Let's do that. Maybe for the TikToks, you pay us $10 a month. We'll give you a TikTok every month of the movie.
Did you just invent Netflix?
Steve will send DVDs to you through the mail. No, old school Netflix. We'll go from the beginning. So real quick, so there are some wrap up questions we want to do. We're very glad you took to Fargo. I was very glad to rewatch it. It was very much like a warm blanket, as cold as it is portrayed. But do you have any other mega blind spots? We know you knocked out Shawshank after we shot at the prison and some other things, but what are some other ones that might be on your list of late to the party movies?
Oh man, what isn't on my list? I feel like at some point in my life, I made the decision to mostly stick to horror. So I've seen an ungodly amount of garbage, B movie trash. And I probably haven't seen, like Godfather 2 or Lawrence of Arabia, or what's another classic? Mac and Me,
Mac and Me.
Whoa. You haven't seen Mac and Me?
I've seen the wheelchair scene,
Well, thanks, Paul Rudd.
Right.
Yeah, well, obviously all 3 of those are classics, but you should see Mac and Me. The other ones can wait.
Yeah. Non-horror, you probably got a handful. What about Coen Brothers movies? I mean, are you tempted to either go find a few more of those you might have missed, or even the Fargo TV series?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to go check out Blood Simple.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that seems just like a great place to start. And then
definitely. That's like proto, the start of a lot of some of their motifs and style and tone. And,
Yeah.
abrupt deaths, which they do often in movies.
Yes.
Yeah, I noticed the abrupt violence reminded me of Jeremy Saulnier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Saulnier and specifically Green Room has some Coen to him, especially like the darker Coen stuff. Like I think he's very much in that kind of Coen-y. Like it would not shock me if I found out that they were a big influence on him because he similar stuff.
He has yet to show if he's got like the slapstick screwball side of him, though. That's what I do like about the Coens is that they can make a No Country and then they can make Hail Caesar, which is just a full-on screwball send-up of old Hollywood.
I don't think he's got that.
Yeah. Do you think he has it in him to make a Lady Killers?
I mean,
I'm not sure the Coen brothers had.
Yeah, I was going to say the Coen brothers. That might be their biggest. They always take swings. That might have been the one time they actually missed.
But no, I mean, I think in general, like it's asking a lot to be the Coens are the Coens because they can dance between the two. But 99% of filmmakers don't want to. But also, like, I'd be surprised if Jeremy Saulnier could also do comedy like an absolute fucking master. So, yeah, I think, he's probably going to stick to the Miller's Crossing Blood Simple side of the Coens.
Although, didn't he do Murder Party?
He did, which had comedy. Like, and I think Green Room has moments of comedy that are interesting and kind of Coen-y, but I do think he's going to always lean heavier on the action. But I do look, throw a rock in Hollywood and you're going to hit someone who the Coen brothers to some degree are a little bit like the Beatles. Like every filmmaker after them uses them as a resource. And so, they've changed most American filmmaking.
Fair to say. I agree. Yeah. Blood Simple, I would highly recommend for sure, just to see, again, them starting out and kind of already sort of coming out fully formed the way like Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs sort of came out almost like a fully formed version of himself. Not quite, but you see the sparks of what he ends up doing.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Here's my question though. We asked you about your Coen blind spots. We asked you about your regular blind spots. You said I've been too busy watching horror movies, not worrying about Mac and Me and other classics. What is your biggest horror blind spot?
Oh man. I should have thought of this before we recorded.
We know it's not Tremors. So you can take that off the list.
Name a horror movie, and then my mind goes blank.
Okay, so any major slashers, you've seen all the Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare sequels.
Yeah. I've missed the entire Children of the Corn franchise, which I'll probably never watch.
You're not
Some
really
of the old Hammer films, the Christopher Lee Draculas, maybe. Anything
Yeah. There you go.
What about like Argento and Giallos? Is there like a?
Oh yeah, there we go. That's I think like Argento, Cronenberg, De Palma. Like I've seen a few, but I've largely missed out on that.
That's there. So the Giallo / Cronenberg stuff is kind of my biggest horror blind spot as well. I mean, I've seen some of it, but there's plenty of it I haven't seen. So we're in the same kind of.
Dude, is that going to be your third spinoff podcast?
Late to the Giallo party?
Yeah.
Late to David Cronenberg's party?
Giallo shots.
Giallo shots, dude.
I mean, that's kind of great. Yeah. I want to copyright that.
Old Wounds. Look for it at a festival near wrapping up.
Sean, you got a bus to catch?
No, I was going out on my. You'd go on the joke. Wrap it up. No, anyway, can you tell us about Old Wounds, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, for sure. Made it with a very small team. It was 5 of us. We shot it in a week for very, very cheap. And it's a couple that are on a road trip to visit her childhood home to meet her family. And then I play the main guy who's filming everything as it's found footage. And so recording our little vacation. And then along the way, some weird stuff starts happening. And it's a bit of a mix of I love mixing genres. So it's got found footage, very heavily inspired by mumblecore, specifically Creep and Baghead. I love Mark Duplass. And there's comedy, there's thriller aspects, horror, mystery, a little bit of romance. I just tried to do something weird and different with found footage and tried to play with some of the tropes. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. And I think with using the resources we had to make what we did. I'm just proud of everybody, and I'm glad we've been playing fests, and it seems like most people are on the same wavelength or understand what we were trying to do. So yeah, and it just feels good to be on this side of making a movie. I mean, I've been wanting to do this my whole life, and going to film festivals is just a fan, which is great. But then you look over and you see the filmmakers all hanging out and talking and having a great time. And it's like, man, I want to be part of that world, So it just feels good to finally make something that people can see. So.
No, absolutely. And our favorite part was the scene in the middle where it turns into a dance number in a full McDonald's ad. Oh, wait, you know that reference. If you saw Mac and Me.
Got him.
No, we're proud of you, brother. You have been a humble, amazing part of every crew that we have had you on. I'm not saying this as a slight. The man has done a PA job. The man has done crafty. He's not above any of it. He fits right in with our kind of mantra.
Well, now he is above it. He's a director now.
Well, no,
so
now
next time you ask him, he's going to tell you.
Next time he's going to be like, "You're going to pay me this time, right?" And be like, "Wait, what?"
He's going to tell you.
We love this man to death. I'm not kidding. He's somebody who I feel like is an invaluable part of any set if you ever want to use him for crew. But again, now he's moving up the world, so he may tell you to go fuck yourself. So, Fargo, fuck yourself.
Oh, got it.
But
old wounds. And no.
Yeah. I love you guys too. And you guys have given me so many wonderful opportunities and have allowed me to grow and evolve and meet some of my heroes, Lucky McKee. And it's been a great experience, a great process. And I recommend to anyone who wants to make movies, I mean, go do as much as you can, do every position, because you're going to learn so much about every aspect of what goes into it and what each department needs. And it's only because I put in this work in all these different positions on all these different sets that we were able to go make Old Wounds, because I had seen enough and experienced enough that I knew, like, how can we lean into what we have and lean into our strengths, knowing we don't have a lot to work with? And how can we shoot on the fly and figure all this stuff out? And it's because I've been on sets and I've seen you guys do it. And so there is no Old Wounds without you guys. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate that kind words. And again, we pay them back tenfold. We will never not have you if you'll take us.
Absolutely.
Have us. Have us and take us. Anyway, Steve Nelson, thank you again for taking the time to watch Fargo and talk about it with us. We were very glad to revisit it ourselves, and we're glad you took to it. You betcha.
You betcha.
Oh,
anyway, thanks, we'll let you go, man. Thank you, bud.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Our thanks again to Steve Nelson. We do love him. That was all legit, as was our soapbox moment, which we seem to do every show now about the state of things and cinema. But yeah, we're glad you liked Fargo. We definitely like Fargo.
Oh yeah. Oh geez. Oh yeah.
Cam loves Fargo.
I want to live in Fargo.
I do not. That's no.
Well, not the cold. It's like I used to say when I lived in Champaign, Illinois. If they could move Champaign to Florida, I would consider living there.
Florida is just the Midwest, but with palm trees.
Exactly.
You've been to the middle of Ohio. It's the same as the middle of Florida, just slightly different trees.
Except grayer, like grayer.
True.
Very drab.
In this little post wrap up, we will go through a few by the numbers bits. You mentioned their box office. They made $24 million domestically with a $60 million total, counting some other territories, England.
Back when that was good.
Yeah.
Those numbers were good back then.
It was good. It still came in number 75 for the year 1996, which was, we mentioned, a year dominated by stuff like Independence Day and Twister, the former of which we do have a Late to the Party episode on with guest Kimberly Elizabeth of Nightmare on Film Street. If you want to ever check that one out, that was a fun chat as well. It's funny, Cam, speaking of 1996, we did another movie from that year. Watching all the rotary phones and the plug-in phones, there was another moment of nostalgia where I went, oh God, pre-9/11 world. It really was so different also because of technology.
Oh yeah.
Watching this one. Oh geez.
Did we just keep doing that? So I guess we didn't have any friends of the show this episode? Did we?
No, I was thinking, I was going through the cast because it's kind of sprawling, but again, so many of those guys might have been just local.
Shocking, we haven't seen like a Buscemi or I guess we haven't.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll keep
track. Somebody will catch us if we did.
That's the only accolade that really matters to them.
It's true.
To be a friend of the pod.
Yeah. Accolade-wise, we've talked about Best Actress winner. It also won Best Original Screenplay. It got nominated for Picture, Director, Supporting Actor for Macy, Cinematography, and Editing for the I just blanked on his name. Alan Smithy. I was about to say Alan Smithy, but the Roderick James. the modern day Alan Smithy
Yes.
that the Coens tried to maneuver. Which, by the way, I do want to this day them to still try to pull that off with some older actor, send them out in a Groucho mask.
Yeah, I wonder if Roderick Jaynes gets nominated on their next movie. I wonder who they will roll out.
Well, yeah, are they back together again?
Maybe Hugh Grant. Maybe did they break up?
Well, they kind of did, because only one of them did Othello. They did a couple split movies.
Yeah, but, they did, but I don't think they've like broken up for good. Hopefully, but yeah, maybe Hugh Grant will play the role of Roderick Jaynes.
He's in his fun like villain character actor.
I just saw Heretic the other day, and so he popped right to mind. But yeah, he'd be fun.
Speaking of Brits, BAFTA gave this Best Director, or Best Direction, as they phrase it there. And then we talked about this being an indie film. It truly was. It swept the Independent Spirit Awards of that year, taking home Film Director, Female Lead, Male Lead, Screenplay, and Cinematography, kind of the usual suspects they were nominated for throughout that award season. As lists go, AFI ranked Fargo in their 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 84, in their 100 Years, 100 Laughs at 93. I guess, people going through wood chippers is really funny.
Yeah.
It's got comedy bits, as we talked about. And then 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, they gave Marge Grunderson number 33 hero.
I suspect that in the 150 years, 150 movies list that will come out in like 35 years, that Fargo will move up that list. I think it will move closer to 1.
Yeah. We talked about the specificity of region and weather and all that stuff. And I do think the movie only gains in esteem over the years. It certainly doesn't falter.
Yeah, I think it will time will be very good to Fargo.
I think it already has, again, coming up on its 30-year anniversary as we record this. The Writers Guild ranked this as the 32nd greatest screenplay ever, which Steve had alluded to earlier. That's gotten many accolades. That's
interesting. I would love to see that list. I'm going to have to find that.
I need to find it. Yeah, that was on the
What do you think gun to your head, what do you think is the greatest screenplay ever?
I think Chinatown's up there on their list.
Yeah, that's way to pick the fucking lowest. That's what people always say. Chinatown and Casablanca.
What I think is on that list.
Chinatown and oh no, I meant to you. What do you think is the greatest?
Ooh, yeah.
Chinatown and Casablanca are the two that people always throw.
Man, you're putting me on the spot. What do I think is? Ooh.
I mean,
listen, I'm a genre nerd, and I will say this: it went through many rewrites, but one of the movies that I go back to is just perfection as far as setups and payoffs, and it's an easy answer too. But I swear to God, Back to the Future, one of the strongest screenplays I think ever.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue Fargo's right up there.
Yeah,
but
I mean, gun to my head, yeah, it would take me a few minutes to come up with like something else. But
it's kind of tricky because there's the stuff that's like the degree of difficulty added in, where some of the Charlie Kaufman stuff, like Eternal Sunshine.
We also talk about screenplay where like there's movies that have been made in the edit, as directors will say,
Yeah.
Sometimes the page isn't as good as what comes out at the very end, due to performances, due to editing, due to other stuff, due to direction. But I mean, Tarantino famously has, broken some rules and written a couple amazing.
I think Pulp Fiction is right up there too when you talk about great screenplays. Like that did a lot of stuff really well.
Something to chew on. I'll have to go look up that list. I just did a little copy paste out of Wiki about the.
Yeah, I'll have to find that. It'd be interesting. I've never seen that list before, and I bet it's got some really fun stuff.
My guess, though, is that Chinatown's first thing came to mind as being.
I'll give you another one that I think should be up near the top on that. Would be for me is Unforgiven. I think that screenplay is fucking fantastic.
You hear that, Doofin? Eat it.
Oh, thank God.
No, Fargo was also added to the National Film Registry by the Preservation Board in December 06. So, yeah, it's considered among great American films for sure, and deserved.
And it's the only one of those with Mike Yanagita, a great character who we did not bring up on the actual main show. And it hurts my heart so much that I had to bring it up. Played by Steve Park of Do the Right Thing and Kindergarten Cop, Falling Down, Snowpiercer, Asteroid City, and Mickey 17 in theaters now.
I didn't know he's in Mickey 17. That's cool. I did see him in Asteroid City. No, we mentioned the character. We just didn't get too deep into him. Yeah, he's one of those character actors that's just popped around for a while.
Indeed.
I remember him specifically in Do the Right Thing. Now you say it.
Yeah, he's great. I love him.
But fun movie. I was really, really glad to watch this one. This might have been the most comfortable kind of rewatch I've had yet on this, just as a movie I probably owed a few more rewatches than I have other Coens I've kind of revisited more often than this one. But this one I feel like that might become one of those every several years and not every 20.
I'd love to find someone, and I think we've got someone on our list. I don't have it up in front of me, but I'd love to find someone who hasn't seen No Country for Old Men, because I owe that one on a rewatch, and I'd love to watch that kind of on the coattails of Fargo.
Yeah.
To kind of see how they're similar and how they're different. Because it's been a hot minute.
I could have gone into a 20-minute tangent when we started talking about that, because Steve's dead on about the difference in the world, from that 10-year stretch, and how nihilism really did enter, I think, their filmography a little more if you look at their post 2000s.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. It is crazy how different the worldview of Fargo and No Country are, which also speaks to how good of writers and filmmakers they are, that they're not kind of stuck in any one thing. But I think it also shows that the world has changed and they have changed in the world. And also, I think the younger you are, the less beaten down by life you are, the more these things tend to have the happy endings. And then you realize that's not how the world works, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, Spielberg, there's so many examples. Scorsese, if you look at the kind of cynicism eras of the world and how they go through it, you know, Spielberg famously has like divorce movies. And then he had his 2000s movies that were kind of like 9/11 reflections. And yeah, Scorsese's movies have different levels of cynicism, and then sometimes they don't. And it's kind of wild. But yeah, the Coens are no different. They definitely have reflections of the time and place.
Well, it's very cool that like there are, because there's only a finite amount of them. There are filmmakers who have been with us long enough, working at a high level long enough to go through that, to see that. Like it's not so often you get filmmakers who, you know, were making movies in the 70s and you're comparing their movies in 2010 to their movies in the 70s. It's kind of a cool thing to see how their worldviews changed and how the world has changed and how they've changed with it. So like, it's cool that you have filmmakers that allow that.
Indeed. You betcha.
Well, you betcha.
For Mr. Cameron Burns, who is well-spoken, well-said, well-read, well-rounded, figuratively and literally, as I am Shawn Talley, his partner in crime for this show called Late to the Party. It has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Thank you again to Stephen Hugh Nelson, our pal, who was late to the party on Fargo, but we're very glad he made it. You, dear listener, don't be late to the party.
Blood has been shed, Jerry.